Hey guys, and welcome to the first ever Dad's Group podcast episode. This is a place where you and I get to connect with incredible leaders, shape the future of fatherhood together, and dig deeper into what is happening inside the minds and hearts of new and expecting fathers. This first episode is a great place for us to start as you get to hear from the CEO and founder of Dad's Group, Tom Docking, as he shares about the heart behind Dad's Group and how it all began. Before we get started though, I'd love to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we all meet on today. I'd like to pay respect to elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people we have listening to this episode today. Cheers guys, hope you enjoy.
But we just want to start from the beginning, mate. How did Dad's Group start?
Thanks, Blair. I guess Dad's Group started like most of new fathers' journeys. And after speaking to thousands of people across, I guess, Australia and the world, so many fathers have had a similar experience to me. They've found out they're about to have a baby. For us and for many, it hasn't been inside the plan of what we were planning for that year or that few years. We had other plans. And so it was quite a big shock. And I think my response was, I guess, fake excitement and fake joy. Because on the inside I was really panicking. I also had excitement and joy, but I was probably way more scared and worried and concerned and frustrated and confused than I probably gave myself credit for. And so in that space, I was searching, and I as I mentioned before, my mum was a midwife. I grew up in that space around understanding birth, I guess, more than most people. And yeah, I had a really supportive family, yet I still felt isolated, and I still felt like I couldn't really speak to anyone about what I was actually feeling. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but without trying to delve into the why that was the case, I did find a lot of other people who had the same thing. And I spent some time with a couple of friends during that kind of build up before Evelyn was born. And the most comfortable I felt with those fears, those perinatal fears, those transition to fatherhood fears, were with a couple of friends who were fathers with their infants, spending time with them. So we had a coffee, or we were out in the park, and I just felt like that role modeling was happening around me, that education was happening around me, that immersion into fatherhood was happening around me, and no different to learning another language. When I went and learned Italian in school, I could only learn so much. But when I went and lived in Italy, I was immersed in that culture, and it just overwhelmed me in a positive sense and helped me learn at such a fast rate. And I think for me, that's just, it kind of clicked. It was like everyone has their own fears in that new fatherhood space. Everyone has their own concerns, whether it be about your relationship. Maybe it's a new relationship that you're in, or maybe it's a challenged relationship you're in, or maybe it's about finances and your work situation is less stable than you'd like it to be, or less enjoyable or rewarding. But everyone, you might need a bigger car, you might need a bigger house, all these different types of things. That's just the scratch on the surface of the different challenges that I've heard about in the perinatal period. But we've all shared those common elements of concern. And for me, you just want to have that peace, or that safety, or that space where you can chat with someone or listen to someone. And for me, it was listening a lot first, and then asking questions when I was ready for that. And so that was the model that we sought to copy and deliver. We absolutely didn't start the first Dad's Group. They've been around for probably hundreds of years. But we did start to research what's needed for fathers, and we did start to work out why aren't Dad's Groups implemented from a systems perspective, from a health and social service systems perspective. Why isn't there effort there to sustain these types of positive community spaces? And 7 years later, or 8 years later now, on this week, we've just learned so much about that. And a key part of the reason for that is that new fathers have their dilemma, their time of challenge, their isolation, but as the years go on, they move on to a different chapter in life. And so what that means is the awesome little dads groups that pop up around around the countryside with huge amount of motivation and effort from fathers who have the energy and interests. It turns into a different chapter of life for them, and generally speaking, those dads groups are not sustained. So that's probably that as well as funding is probably the two key areas that we realise that good, healthy role model supportive communities of fathers don't happen without catalysing them or supporting them. And as we've looked, not many health programs do work or sustain without funding, support, and catalysing that change and leadership. So it's no different to any other, I guess, model of care. It requires intentional support and funding and resources. I guess so. That's how Dad's Group, the organisation, started. And since then we've implemented funded programs, non-funded programs, volunteer-led programs, events, and we really have enough data to understand what works and what doesn't work. How to engage fathers effectively, not just effectively from your program perspective, but effectively from what's meaningful for fathers. How do they, after you engage with them and do your program elements, how do they actually feel? Do they feel connected? And how is that different towards what they're getting from a hospital health service antenatal class, a traditional antenatal class, or or traditional digital health programs?
That's good, man. And I think that's a very broad element of the starting of Dad's Group. So, which is really cool. So I'd love to go back a little bit. So you've started Dad's Group. You had a good group of mates that you caught up with, you would learn from, you encouraged each other. Moving on to starting Dad's Group, what was the process of actually starting it? So you've had this revelation, you've had these experiences, this awesome group of mates around you. What actually, and that's the thing is, I know you, Tom, we've had plenty of time together. You're a driven person, dude. You're an entrepreneur, you're not someone that just sort of goes with the status quo. So what was the first steps that you took, or the beginning stages of Dad's Group? You've identified it. Now what?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now I understand your question better. Thanks, Blair, for that clarification. I think for me, it wasn't a point in time as much as it was a time over a period. So essentially over a few month period, it was consolidation of these thoughts. It was those thoughts that I was having, those isolation, those moments of connection with people. It was joining the dots. It was connecting the dots. I guess some of us don't have a choice, as you've seen the work that my mum did in her life. She's a social entrepreneur. She's a community development person, and it's just built into her. She and Dad brought us up in an Indigenous community in Northern Territory, so the cultural importance of community is just ingrained in our values. And so when it comes to that, you don't really have a choice, but you see the world through a lens of cultural cultures, but also community development opportunities. So what that meant for me was I was just joining the dots and all these different people around the place that had similar challenges. And then for me, what I did was talked about it. I spoke it, and you said, I had a whole lot of mates. I didn't have a whole lot of mates. I had one or two mates who were in that space with me. But those one or two mates, I could bounce my ideas off and go, hey, what do you think about this? Did you feel that isolation as well? Did you feel like the hospital connected with you well? There should be something done about that. Do you know if there is anything? These are the questions. So I guess my response to your question is, I started asking the right questions, which led me to where I am today. So, and those questions were really around what supports are there? What does the average dad feel? How well do the supports address how fathers are feeling? Are dad's feelings valid? Are dads allowed to have feelings in this space, in that maternal space, or are they not allowed to culturally? And if they're not allowed to, why would that be? Then how does dads have feelings and share feelings and address those challenging feelings in the context of helping mum as well, not taking away resources away from mum, because that's really critical. My own dilemma there is not sharing a lot of my feelings, because my wife has gone through so much of a traumatic experience, and I've gone, potentially vicariously through that same traumatic experience, but separated from it. So that's all those things cause challenges for me. And for me to answer your question, what did I actually do? It was ask the questions that led me down a path. And that path was just consolidation of the need, and also consolidation of the general, the will or the support that this idea of support would have from the medical and maternal fraternity. So that means testing those ideas with your child health nurse. Like I've still got a good relationship with our in Victoria, our maternal child health nurse, and she's at different times in her team have given us inputs on how to develop programs, to co-design and co-develop. So the steps, I guess, were over a long period of time, but they were just edging towards, maybe there is something here that could be done, and maybe that thing that could be done would benefit lots. And if the gap in the service delivery from the health system is as big as we think it is, this is where it gets exciting. You think, well, this could actually change a generation significantly. So and then over the subsequent years, joining the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium and presenting those ideas and getting them validated by super intelligent researchers who are now I consider friends and mentors. It's been rewarding to see that there is a great need, and there's a lot of research out there saying that fathers who don't engage with their children in those early years have complications themselves and for their children and for their relationships later on. And the alternate of that is true as well. So fathers that do engage early on and are encouraged to engage and are supported to engage are going to have incredible family relationships, and their children are going to develop more effectively as leaders as well. So, they're just obvious things to me, and to anyone who understands community development. They're not a revelation in the notions of what they are themselves, but they're just simple and basic and obvious and good, and that's, and so it's actually a journey of going, well, they're all things that, if you're lucky enough to have a great community when you grew up, you'll know that these things are good and healthy. And you also know that not everyone was that lucky to have them. So whilst I had my own personal, internal challenges, dilemmas, anxieties, different stages, maybe I was depressed but didn't, get it diagnosed. In that space, I found a need that was valid. And I guess that's important. And as we all know, we all have needs at different stages. Sometimes we deny them and we don't acknowledge them as valid. But how do we support validating people's feelings that are challenging and positive in a way that's helpful? This is the important bit: helpful for that child, helpful for that mother, and helpful for that family. Because a lot of the time, you want to validate someone's feelings, but at the cost of someone else's feelings. And that's what the dilemma is for all new fathers. Is I can see you smiling now. You've had those feelings, like I need help, but that's at the cost of my children or my wife, or my family, and so you deny the help, and then you're prolonging that, you're crushing down those feelings, and that's not sustainable. So how do we do it in a way that helps me, but also helps, mum, child, and family? It's a really complex one, but we're definitely, we've got some answers now.
Yeah, and I would love to get to those answers eventually. That's for sure. And I definitely, there's so many times I could smile through that, dude, and I'm like, yeah, I could feel that. I can recognize with that, and I think that's, from my experience, been really amazing. Of being part of Dad's group is just having those other dads that, because like you're saying, all those feelings, like I felt isolated. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like I should have these feelings, like, or anything else like that. So that's been the great thing is with Dad's Group is normalizing that, and it's like, yeah, you're actually expected to have those feelings because you're a human being.
Yeah.
That's massive. That's really, really great. So that's really cool, mate, and that's encouraging to hear how Dad's Group started, and the things that have come to a revelation for you in that process. So, in a practical sense, then, so what is Dad's Group at its simplest form? So we've just heard about you talking about how you were convicted and the challenges you had as a dad, the gaps that you saw. How are those gaps? What are the process of those gaps to have started to be filled in? Like, what does that practically look like?
Trialing, testing, piloting. You know, it's actually science. It's
Yeah.
the process of applying science or scientific methodology to your thinking. And you know, science, as any scientist will tell you, is not a radical, difficult concept to understand or even do. It's just having a hypothesis or a thought about something. It's then setting out what you think is going to happen, and then going through the process of identifying if it did happen. In our case, it was, you know, fathers need help. What kind of help do they need? If we help them like this, you know, we expect the outcome will be that. And we just went through that, and we keep going through that iterative process for 8 years. But you know, along the way, you build a kernel of value, and that kernel grows into a broader piece of value, and then another layer grows on top of that. And then by, you know, 8 years later, you've got a sophisticated model of care that isn't being implemented anywhere else, that actually demonstrates how it supports new fathers who are isolated, how it supports new mothers who may also be isolated, how it helps them with their support pathways of where they can get help, and also helps them connect and bond with their infant in that kind of really important early days, hours, months, and years stage. So, does that answer your question, or did you want me to?
Yeah, it does. It's and that's the point of these episodes is there's so much involved with Dad's Group and what we're actually trying to achieve. So it does answer some of my point, and there's again a rabbit hole that I can dig into going down there. But I think that's going to be for another episode for sure. But
were you wondering,
no, that was
like, what
good.
did it look like when it started? Were you wondering about what it, like we connected with different community organisations and hosted barbecues and coffee catch-ups. So that was fundamentally what we did. We went out there on Facebook, found fathers in the area. Actually, the key point of catalysing an actual first Dad's Group was Mums Group. So Kate's Mums Group, chatting to the mums. Not all the dads were doing well. We had a spectrum.
So Kate's your wife?
My wife, yeah. Sorry. So
yeah.
To be very clear, Kate is my wife. Yeah. So Kate and I would talk about these things, and I'm kind of consolidating my ideas around the needs for fathers in a way that supports mothers, and she kind of tests that theory with the mothers at Mothers Group, and that just opened up a can of worms at Mothers Group, and you're like, okay, great, we found it. You know, this is a need. All different types of fathers there, all different capabilities and interests. You know, all different types of relationships there in the Mothers Group. So it was the perfect start, you know, place to start, and just inviting some of those dads down to catch up for a coffee with the baby was the first thing. And then, you know, over the time, we realized calling it a Dad's Group and inviting more people outside that small unit has been what changes it from like a benefit to you and your mates to a benefit to the wider community in an intergenerational, you know, social impact piece. And that's what we do in Dad's Group, is find people who go, yeah, I'll catch up with my mates and we go to the park and have a coffee. And that's good. It's really good. It's like 80% of what we want all fathers to have access to. The last 20% is what changes it for the guy who doesn't have access to that. For the guy who's had a new baby but relocated interstate and his partner's not part of a Mums Group. You know, his parents and family and support friends aren't there. And it's those people who the system drops that we need to catch. Which, you know, we don't. Of course, it's not our responsibility as the average dad to go and help everyone, but it is our opportunity, without a
Yeah.
doubt. And I mean, all of us are seeking to have more purpose in our lives or address some of the needs that we have. And as a new father, you have no time, you have no resources. You can go and drink a coffee with a guy and provide a space for him to connect with you around what's important and happening now for you, and that is fatherhood. And you transition to fatherhood. So yeah, that's what it first looked like. Connecting with the mums groups, going and meeting coffee. I think Janet stuck you on a cafe in Ringwood, and then just opening it up to the community. Come on down, and we just met, you know, some of the people have been with us for years through that process.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's, and then the thing, so how did you get from that, the local catch up? So you started off with mothers groups and you just caught up with the dads in the mothers group, and then you went out from there and started other dads groups, and it was a slow transition from to there. What was the next step after that? Because I mean, that's the thing, is dads groups are a lot broader than just the community groups now, and we're going to get to that point. What was the next step after dads groups starting up?
The next step was going, well, this is a thing that we need to, you know, either put more effort into and make into I guess a movement, or it's something that it was nice and then we're moving on to the next chapter. And I referred to that a little bit before around, you know, researching that space. That was the big next step. It was the big next question is, well, you just do your local dads group and that was your chapter, and you move on, you go back to work and you work for the man, or you work for the company or whatever, or is this something that you want to invest a significant chunk of your life into, and you know, maybe 5 years or something? And then we looked into that, and I guess the answer was no one's been able to sustain those changes. No one's there long enough to do anything about it for a period of time that impacts the system. So that was the answer. We needed to, well, then to make social change, you need to set up an entity. You need to get a board. You set up a structure. At that time, it was a Victorian-based structure, incorporated association. Now it's moved into a national program. So you know, a national type of entities behind that to be able to do that and register with the ACNC and all that kind of thing. But there's a whole bunch of admin and governance that's required to do to continue that change. And I think, you know, that's probably why a lot of people stopped as well. It's like there's a big gap between doing a coffee catch up with dads and maybe making 2 other groups to actually making that a program, scalable, intended to change the system. You know, these are big 25-year generational things. And that's when, for me, it was like, yeah, I think, you know, if you leave your mark on the world doing something that needs to be done, that's a good thing. You know, like in that transition as well, you're thinking, I'm going to be a dad. So who am I as a father for these kids when they're 5, 15, 25, 35? What am I displaying that's going to show them that, you know, I invested my time in something that I believed in? And how am I going to, you know, help them to make good decisions in that space? They don't need to be the same decisions or even similar, but they'll see that, you know, I made decisions around a need that I saw in the world, and, you know, hopefully I'll leave the world a far better place for these kids and these mums and these dads who are going through challenging times. And I won't do it because I've met and helped them all, but I'll do it because I've spent enough time, like years, working out, well, how do we actually make this change, and how do we work with people to co-design a solution that will actually help these new mums, and how do we do it in a way where we're not the face of it all? You know, we don't need to be the face of it all. We just need to be behind the scenes, working, collaborating, joining the dots, helping those programs implement, and then working out, evaluating them, making sure they actually do help and they don't hinder, and they, and that has been, I guess the joy of my work has been, and the pain at the same time. The pain of my work is doing that, and the joy of my work is when it works. And I'm just so grateful to have met some incredible leaders from all across incredible organisations, and people who have founded organisations, people fearlessly lead organisations into new chapters, all in that space, and people who actually, you meet people who don't want to collaborate; they want to do it themselves. And they're always a surprise to me, even though I shouldn't be surprised. But then you meet people who genuinely go, yeah, nah, we can work with you on that, and we can help the people who we help with a little bit of what you're doing, and we'd love to do that. And that's what makes the work rewarding. And I just, that's what builds our partnerships with, Panda, SMS for Dads, and the organisations that, University of Sunshine Coast, people who we don't really, we don't partner essentially with brands. We partner with incredible leaders, and each of those brands, Healthy Male, like they have leaders that have a heart, that have a genuine interest for supporting, and they demonstrate that through their leadership.
Yeah, and that's what I was really going to get into next. Is something that I really appreciate about you, Tom, and the way that you run this organization, lead this organization. It isn't about making a name for Dad's Group. It is about that impacts that we can have. And it's not even just about the impacts that we can have. It's about the impacts that can be had by all involved, right? So that collaboration is absolutely amazing, and it's so great to be a part of that. And as you mentioned, I do want to shout out to some of our partners, Panda, SMS for Dad, Healthy Male, University of Sunshine Coast. Like, these guys have been absolutely amazing and doing amazing work. There's another part too, and that I really want to dig into is the hospitals. You have a great relationship with hospitals and midwives. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, about like why that's so important to you? Why are hospitals so important to you to get into?
Yeah. Look, firstly, Mum, like I mentioned, being a midwife in the antenatal space, educating new parents on the changes that are about to happen is something that is core to what we do now, because it's but it's also an area of personal interest and passion. I think arguably, I don't know if anyone would agree with me, but nurses and midwives, they've always been the nicest people that I've met across the world. Like, they are carers. They're genuine carers. They work and work and work and work to support and care, to their own detriment often, which is not advisable or good, but they demonstrate caring for people, and in that space, it's a really good space to start designing programs with people who care. And they're so important, not just because of the carers, but the people who are seeking to help are new and expecting mothers and fathers, and they're the experts in caring for the mothers in those spaces. And they're also better qualified to help understand the plight or the challenges or the fear or the confusion of the fathers in that space too, right? So we know about the fatherhood challenges from lived experience as fathers ourselves. They know about it from a medical professional perspective, where they see a concerned father and have nothing to give him to support him. And that's the perfect, nexus of connection for us, is like, they're going this way to support the mums. We're going this way to support the dads. But there's a place where we meet in the middle, and we almost exchange cards and exchange pamphlets, and we're like, okay, you're helping the mum, cool. I'm helping the dad, great. This is what you can say to help the mum, and here's what you can say to help the dad. Oh, thank you. I didn't actually know we could do that, and that's a great program. Okay, thank you, cool. And then you move off and you go and do your jobs, right? And so that in that space, hospitals and midwives and nurses and executives of hospitals are equally important. I remember Helen, one of the amazing midwives in our program, just said, Tom, come and meet David Rosengreen. He's really, he makes himself available to all the staff in the hospital every Thursday at this time. come and tell him about that, dad's group and the projects that you're doing to engage fathers. I reckon he'll really appreciate that. And he did. Like, we went down there, we chatted to him. He was an executive at one of the hospitals, Metro North, at the time, and he just listened. And yeah, he liked what we were doing. He could see the need for it. But then him and other people in the hospital, Karen Lust is an executive director there as well. They really get it. And then when you've got the person in the coalface, so the midwife or antenatal class, professional, working with their executive team, and the executive team get it, they're on board. Karen, as I mentioned before, she put a man with a pram shirt on and raised money for the cause. She's a gun. She gets out there. Yeah. And it's just like, it's they're powerful, they're gatekeepers, they open the doors for us because they know that we're here for the long term. David, again, like, they open the doors for us. They stand up in executive meetings and say, this is a valuable project, and it's worthwhile us exploring how to support fathers more effectively and mothers across all our health services. To us, that's like, that's years worth of work, because we've put in this time to run programs in the community, run digital programs, run hospital antenatal class programs, then validate it all, evaluate it all, both internally and external evaluation, so that we can finally say to someone, like these people, Karens and the Davids of the world, like, this is really changing lives. We want to be able to say, and this is where we work probably with, people like Jackie from Deakin and University of Peru from University of Sunshine Coast, and Nick Stevens from Sunshine Coast University. We want to be able to say, this will change the long-term outcomes for infants, right? And I'd love to be able to demonstrate over a 10 or 20-year period the changes in the infants, in their growth and development, because of engaging with fathers in an effective way, both from that antenatal space through the community space. And a perfect example of that is, which, this weekend we're at the Pregnancy and Baby and Children's Expo in Brisbane, which is a place where we've always been. These great partners of ours help us to get there and connect with the dads. But one of the dads, I said, "Oh, how are you going?" He said, "Oh, I met you at the antenatal class." I'm like, "Oh, cool. So you've been through?" He said, "Yeah, I went to Caboolture Hospital." I'm like, "Oh, wow. Yeah, I met Dad's group there, and then, we kind of, had my baby, and now I'm here now." I'm like, "Oh, you're solo?" He's like, "Yeah, your wife's working or partner's working." And I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty impressive." This guy's 20 something years old. Like, he's a young dad. He's out there with his almost 1-year-old child pushing his pram. Like, "Oh, tell us about your experience. I've been fascinated to actually hear what happens after, what that process for you." And he's like, "Oh, I joined up some of these different dads groups, and I said, 'Oh, have you been able to connect with any dads in a good way where you've got a friend?" He's like, "No, not really." "Oh, just with Keegan." And then I'm like, "Oh, hi, Keegan." So I talked to Keegan, I talked to this guy, James, and, like, they would have no idea, but they are ticking the box on everything that we would hope for them to be doing. They're hanging out together. They're with their kids. They're taking the kids to parks. They've got complex situations. Fatherhood for them hasn't been a great experience. Absence of fathers, lack of fathering. But together, these two young 20-year-olds understand the importance of being a good dad, and they have a drive to be a good dad. So much so that they are, he even said, we get laughed at about by our young mates as well, because we're the two dads that hang out with our kids, So they're standing against the culture of what they're in, and they're supporting each other. And then I said, "Oh, that's an incredible story. Like, how, tell us more about it." And one of them said, one of us went through a really dark time of depression and anxiety, and, we're just always there for each other. And when I heard that, I'm like, this is where it's at. This is what we want. We want everyone to be able to have access to that kind of support. And really, we're building basic friendships, in the perinatal period. And that's, I guess, to your point about where this will start. the research that we founded this on was that the Men's Social Connectedness study in 2011 was highlighted that fathers reduce their social connections. Essentially, new fathers have no mates. That's if you want to, consolidate that, distill that down. New fathers, no friends, and every single one of us has had that challenge in our new father journey at different stages, or at least felt like you don't have any friends. And so these guys have been able to be mates, support each other, hang out together, encourage each other, and then come back to the baby expo because what the other guys are about to have is another baby, with his partner as well. She was there too, and just that is the narrative we want. And because we know the opposite narrative is struggle town, more and more complex and severe anxiety, depression outcomes, and then the tragic things can happen like isolation, suicide, family violence, and these horrible outcomes for the kids. And they're avoidable, and through really simple measures, as long as the measures are done with the level of, frameworks of control and support that are able to support fathers, throughout the process in a way that's, evidence-based and well-researched.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you would like to find out more about Dad's Group or join a digital Dad's Group session, which is what these podcast episodes are recorded from, or connect with one of our amazing partners, please go and check out our website at www.dadsgroup.org, which we will also add in our information in the podcast notes. Please remember to like, subscribe, and review, and please share with any dads and families that may benefit from hearing this podcast. Cheers, guys, and we are so pumped to do this journey with you.